Hi everyone, welcome back to Pages of the Globe. Today I'm going to be reading to you the short story, The Aged Mother by Matsuō Basho. Before we start, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the author, and then we're going to jump straight into the story. So Matsuō Basho was born in 1644 and died on November 28, 1694. He was one of the most famous poets of the Edo period in Japan, and during his lifetime, Basho was recognized for his works in the collaborative haikai no renga form. Today, after centuries of commentary, he is recognized as the greatest master of haiku, then called hokku. He is also well known for his travel essays, beginning with Records of a Weather-Exposed Skeleton in 1684, written after his journey west to Kyoto and Nara. Matsuō Basho's poetry is internationally renowned, and in Japan, many of his poems are reproduced on monuments and traditional sites. Although Basho is famous in the West for his hokku, or haiku, he himself believed his best work lay in leading and participating in renku. He is quoted as saying, "Many of my followers can write hokku as well as I can. Where I show who I really am is in linking haikai verses." He had many pen names, but the main ones that you may have heard of was Sobo, Tose, and Basho. He was introduced to poetry at a young age after integrating himself in the intellectual scene of Edo, or modern Tokyo. He quickly became well known throughout Japan and made a living as a teacher, but then renounced to the social urban life of the literary circles and was inclined to wander throughout the country, heading west, east, and far into the northern wilderness to gain inspiration for his writing. His poems were influenced by his first-hand experience of the world around him, often encapsulating the feeling of a scene in a few simple elements. Now, as for influence in literary criticism, rather than sticking to the formulas of Kigo, which remains popular in Japan even today, Basho aspired to reflect his real environment and emotions in his hokku, which many poets still do. Even during his lifetime, the effort and style of his poetry was widely appreciated. After his death, it only increased. Several of his students compiled quotations from him about his own poetry, most notably Mukai Kyorai and Hattori Doho. During the 18th century, appreciation of Basho's poems grew even more fervent, and commentators such as Ishiko Setsui and Moro Nainjaro went to great lengths to find references in his hokku to historical events, medieval books, and other poems. These commentators were often lavish in their praise of Basho's obscure references, some of which were probably literary false cognates. In 1793, Basho was defied by the Shinto bureaucracy, and for a time criticizing his poetry was literally blasphemous. In the late 19th century, the period of unanimous passion of Basho's period came to an end. Masho Shiki, arguably Basho's most famous critic, tore down the long-standing orthodoxy with his bold and candid objections to Basho's style. However, Shiki was also instrumental in making Basho's poetry accessible in English, and leading to intellectuals and the Japanese public at large, he invented the term haiku, replacing hokku, to refer to the freestanding 575 form, from which he considered the most artistic and desirable part of the haikai no renga. Now, critical interpretation of Basho's poems continued into the 20th century, with notable works like Yamamoto Kenchi, Emoto Noichi, and Ogata Tosomo. I could go on and on about Basho's incredible work and writing, and people honestly really did respect him, but we really do need to get to the story. So without further ado, let's get on with the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to read next. The Aged Mother by Matsuō Basho. Long, long ago there lived at the foot of the mountain a poor farmer and his aged widowed mother. They owned a bit of land which supplied them with food, and they were humble, peaceful, and happy. Shining was governed by a despotic leader who, though a warrior, had a great and cowardly shrinking from anything suggestive of failing health and strength. This caused him to send out a cruel proclamation. The entire province was given strict orders to immediately put to death all aged people. Those were barbarous days, and the custom of abandoning old people to die was not uncommon. The poor farmer loved his aged mother with a tender reverence, and the order filled his heart with sorrow. But no one ever thought twice about obeying the mandate of the governor, so with many deep and hopeless sighs, the youth prepared for what at the time was considered the kindest mode of death. Just at sundown, when his day's work was ended, he took a quantity of unwhitened rice, which was the principal food for the poor. He cooked and dried it, and tied it in a square cloth, which he swung in a bundle around his neck, along with a gourd filled with cool, sweet water. Then he lifted his helpless mother to his back and started on his painful journey up to the mountain. The road was long and steep. The road was crossed and recrossed by many paths made by the hunters and woodcutters. In some place they lost and confused, but he gave no heed. One path or another, it mattered not. On he went, climbing blindly upward, ever upward, towards the high bare summit of what is known as Obashuma, the mountain of the abandoning of the aged. The eyes of the old mother were not so dim, but that they noted the reckless hastening from one path to another, and her loving heart grew anxious. Her son did not know the mountain's many paths, and his return might be one of danger, so she stretched forward her hand, snapping the twigs from bushes as they passed. She quietly dropped a handful of every few steps of the way, so that they climbed. The narrow path behind them was dotted at frequent intervals with tiny piles of twigs. At last the summit was reached. Weary and heartsick, the youth gently released his burden and silently prepared a place of comfort as his last duty to the loved one. Gathering fallen pine needles, he made a soft cushion and tenderly lifted his old mother into it. He wrapped her padded coat more closely about the stooping shoulders, and with tearful eyes and an aching heart he said farewell. The trembling mother's voice was full of unselfish love as she gave her last injunction. "Let not thine eyes be blinded, my son," she said. "The mountain road is full of dangers. Look carefully and follow the paths which holds the piles of twigs. They will guide you to the familiar path farther down." The son's surprised eyes looked back over the path, and then at the poor old shriveled hands, all scratched and soiled by their work of love. His heart broke within, and bowing down to the ground, he cried aloud, "O honorable mother, your kindness breaks my heart. I will not leave you. Together we will follow the path of twigs, and together we will die." Once more he shouldered his burden. How light it seemed now, and hastened down the path through the shadows and the moonlight to the little hut in the valley. Beneath the kitchen floor was a walled closet for food, which was covered and hidden from view. There the son hid his mother, supplying her with everything she needed, continually watching and fearing she would be discovered. Time passed, and he was beginning to feel safe, and when again the governor sent forth heralds bearing an unreasonable order, seemingly as a boast of power, his demand was that his subjects should present him with a rope of ashes. The entire province trembled with dread. The order must be obeyed, yet who in all of Shining could make a rope of ashes? One night, in great distress, the son whispered the news to his hidden mother. "Wait," she said, I will think. On the second day, she told him what to do. "Make a rope of twisted straw," she said. "Then stretch it upon a row of flat stones and burn it on a windless night." He called the people together and did as she said, and when the blaze died down, there upon the stones, with every twist and fiber showing perfectly, lay a rope of ashes. The governor was pleased at the wit of the youth and praised greatly, but he demanded to know where he had obtained his wisdom. "Alas, alas," cried the farmer, "the truth must be told," and with deep bows he related his story. The governor listened and then meditated in silence. Finally he lifted his head. "Shining needs more strength of youth," he said gravely. "Ah, I should have forgotten the well-known saying, 'With the crown of snow there cometh wisdom.' That very hour the cruel law was abolished, and custom drifted into as far a past that only legends remain." The end. All right, so that was The Aged Mother by Matsuō Basho. First, I'm going to give you a little overview of the story, and then we're going to jump straight into the analysis. So the narrative, The Aged Mother by Matsuō Basho, is a Japanese folktale, and it emphasizes the bond between a mother and a son, as well as the wisdom of the elderly. Once upon a time, there lived a poor farmer who loved and treasured his mother above everything else. They lived in the country Shining and was ruled by a dictatorial ruler who once ordered the killing of all elders because he hated seeing anything that was of bad health. Now, since the poor farmer cherished his mother so much, he did not want to carry out the order, but the situation demanded it. So he decided to take her mother up to the mountain and abandon her as a gentle way of killing her. Or at least that was the gentlest way possible in that time. Now, at the top of the mountain, when he says his goodbyes to his mother, he is touched by her wise counsel and concern for his son's safety, because she knows that he might get lost once he comes down the mountain. So she leaves a trail for him. And in doing so, she's obviously going to be very uncomfortable because she's breaking twigs off nearby areas, and she's on his back and she's old. So she basically decided to harm herself, put herself in harm's way, just to make sure that her son is safe. And she's literally about to die. So he decides then just to return home with his mother and hide her in his hut so that no one will notice. Now days pass, and after some time, the cruel ruler issues another order, and this time it's to present him with a rope made of ashes. And this time, when the Shining youth specifically were confused as to how to carry out such an impossible order, the farmer is able to do it with the help of his mom. Now, the governor is really surprised, and he's wow, this is so smart. And he asks the farmer, how were you able to figure this out? And the farmer's you know what, I'm not gonna lie, I used my mom's help. Now, instead of the governor basically punishing him, he decides not to penalize him for rescuing his mother, but he does withdraw his proclamation as he recognizes the value of the elderly in the country's development. The story is just a normal moralic story that the knowledge of the elderly is just as vital as the strength of the youth. Because keep in mind, basically through the entire story, the governor is just kind of talking about how the youth is the strong one, that's the one that should be kept, and he's basically uncomfortable with the idea of aging, which is why he even says kill all the old people in the first place. But the story just ends in a simple moral, and it's about just the wisdom that older folks can kind of offer, specifically in a dictatorship, and that even though aging may take away the strength of the human body, wisdom can never die, it can only grow. The mother was the one who kind of guided her son through the mountains. She was the one who taught her son what love was, and that's kind of irreplaceable to other things that a child could have. She gained wisdom through her experiences, and that's something that the youth could not have because they haven't experienced much yet. That is it for today. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to read next.